I should take a photo of our hammerhead. Does it sound much more distant?
Yes, much more distant. It sounds like your head is all the way in the toilet.
Okay. And then less distant? Less distant?
Yes.
Less distant?
Yes, you're right.
Less
Your microphone is in your mouth.
Okay, great. So the microphone that I've got on these cheap like gamer headphones is a placebo microphone with respect to this computer, which I otherwise like. So I really should have taken a photo of myself wearing a tethered wired microphone under my desk to prevent myself from being close to my laptop microphone.
You're crawling around on the floor. I got you.
Crawling around on the floor. This is like one of these things where you want a member of my family to walk in, just thinking to themselves like, "This is our future
It's our
depends on
tech
this
genius,
person."
right?
Right.
Good.
Okay, so that's good to know. So I actually need to be until I get my microphone worked out. But is this okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
Right.
And I would say your microphone, placebo or not, when I was listening to recording last time, I was very envious of it. I feel like my microphone sucks, and yours sounded great. So
okay, good. So I think the little boom mic that I have on these cheapy gamer headphones actually might have worked on the other laptop. This is the laptop that has a defective T pause key, not Tiki.
Yes.
Which I kept talking about my broken Tiki, and everyone is like, what is going on with that guy?
Torch? Like, why? Does it
like,
come up so often that just saying torch just is wasting too much time, so you're just referring to it as a tiki? I guess that makes sense.
Right. Even my 10-year-old daughter was like, I assumed you meant tiki like torch. Like, no, a T space key. A key that has a T on it. A key and not tea that you drink. But anyway, it's so. I'm on the laptop. I'm really excited. Do we have our bot in here? Is our little...
Yep, bot claims to be recording. Nice. Yep. So if you go into the live chat channel, it has a big thing that says it's recording. I think people can see it. People in the past have started it. Nobody started this time, but I assume that's just because everyone's over starring things. But yeah, we seem to be recording. And I would say the bot did a great job recording, mostly.
It feels like this is a shit sandwich for the bot. Are you about giving the bot its annual performance review? Because this is what it feels like.
Bot, I'm glad you're listening. Because bot, they give one of the
everyone values the bot.
That's right. We all there's a feeling in the organization that the bot is doing good work. Recorded everybody's voice as a different channel, which is actually great. The problem is they weren't perfectly time synchronized. So when I loaded them into the editing software, you would be like laughing at a joke before it was told, which, I mean, you are very quick on the uptake. Don't get me wrong. But,
I am able to see, with respect to comedy, I can see 3 seconds into the future. It's a strange natural gift.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, bot is mostly good. Little hair on the bot, but
little hair on the bot. Okay, so that's interesting. Because that would happen with Twitter Spaces as well. Actually, it gives us some. With Twitter Spaces, we had that same issue where people were laughing at jokes that hadn't yet been made.
Yeah. I do have a question for folks who are listening. Can you go into the 1212 podcast channel and type something? Because I haven't. Oh, there we go. Okay, everyone, you can stop. You can stop typing.
Okay.
You did a great job, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, you can see it now. You can see the stop recording button. I think only I can click it. I think in the past someone tried to click it and got sad from that. But anyway, yeah, fingers crossed. That's right. So let's hope.
I also do love, Adam, that you and I have known one another for so long that we will implicitly make references to kind of our shared history. And when I just feel, for the benefit of everyone, we should say that when you're saying there's a feeling in the organization, this is actual direct feedback I used to get from my very bad manager.
Yes. The kind of passive voice feedback, disembodied feedback.
Disembodied feedback, and in particular, he would always, when giving me negative feedback, he would always give me negative feedback in the third person. So it would be, there's a feeling in the organization that while Brian is technically correct, it's like, okay, here we go. Brian is technically correct. He sometimes expresses it in a way that is not the most productive. I'm like, who's this Brian guy we're talking about? Oh, me. Oh, I'm that guy.
I want to meet this guy because
I
I
want to
think
meet
we
this
would
guy
get
because
along great, right?
that's right. Yes, there's a feeling in the organization that the bot could improve its sequencing of tracks.
Yeah. But, it actually is good because then if someone is like off typing in the background, I was able to like mute that one track. So, bot, you can stick around.
There you go, the classic shit sandwich. I am very excited for this conversation, unnaturally so.
Yeah.
So this kind of had me reflecting on like the full, audio narrative, honestly, not to go too too deep with this, but and kind of like when did I first? Because I feel like we were into podcasts from the beginning, right?
I think you were into podcasts from the beginning.
Okay, I
I
was
know
wondering
that
if this was
you
going to
are.
happen.
No. And I laud you for it. Like seriously, like I feel like you've given me podcast recommendations since the days of the iPod, and I don't know, like I just wasn't super into it at times, and all of a sudden I think, no. So I would commute and read. Like I wouldn't have that many times in my life where what I wanted was audio. And I guess in the last several years, my life has changed in such a way where I'm like walking dogs and driving around and like doing dishes more and folding more laundry and all this stuff where like this is exactly what I want. And maybe with like I think also with the pandemic, I'm getting less kind of in-person yammering, and so I want some more, offline yammering.
Yeah, I think all those things are true. And because I feel the same way. Like, I feel I've always been into podcasts, but they've played a really different role in the last couple of years. And I think it's because, like, just more doing housework and being homebound was a part of it. I also feel like having Bluetooth headphones makes a big difference with respect to like being able to listen to something while doing housework. Maybe that's too quotidian or pedestrian, but just being able to be totally hands-free while you're again, doing dishes or folding laundry or whatever. But as I was thinking about like an audio narrative, do you remember? So I remember discovering This American Life on radio when it was like, I'm going to sound so old-timey when I talk about, like, I feel old-timey when I talk about broadcast television, and for whatever reason, when I talk about broadcast radio, I feel I sound even more old-timey. But
It does sort of have the sense of like the whole family huddled around the wireless.
I get huddled around the wireless. Exactly. Like, well, because
The
in
fireside
particular,
chats, right?
when back when, having it was a huge deal to have like a CD player in a car, felt like a total luxury. And I used to just, listen to the radio going from point A to point B. And there was this program that would come on a local public radio station with seemingly no repeatability. It was like the time would move around a lot, and this is early internet days, so you didn't really have an online schedule, but this is This American Life. And were you ever with me? So I bought a bunch of This American Life on cassette that I still have.
No. Hey, good thing your car has a cassette player.
Exactly. Good thing I've got a cassette deck in the old vehicle.
Yeah.
But in particular, I just found that like for long haul driving, I really enjoyed listening to, and This American Life is obviously extraordinary. And when I was trying to think like, what were some of the first things that I listened to in a podcast? I think Radiolab was the same way, where I was only catching it occasionally on the radio and being delighted by it. So when that was made available whenever I wanted, it just felt like an outrageous luxury.
Yeah. For me, actually, it was another NPR show. It was Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, because I would my older son would go to some sporting activity on I think like Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, and would always line up with Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and we would sort of linger in the car to like answer the last few questions rather than going in early. And then that's become something that we listen to. I guess you call it a podcast, right? Because I can download it asynchronously, and that's something that we still listen to in the family as a family in the car.
You gather around the old wireless as a family.
That's right. That's right.
So So I feel like I've always been listening to podcasts, but especially especially recently, but also with like as I mentioned, with long haul driving, and especially when I was skiing with the kids. We do a lot of day tripping, and it's a couple hours each direction, and podcasts are really really load bearing there. So I realized that I listened to a lot of podcasts that were somewhat load bearing for Oxide, actually, in that,
Oh,
which is kind of funny. As I was kind of writing this stuff down. So I don't know where we want to start. I obviously want to hear, Adam, I want to hear some of your favorites. You just turned me on to a great one, actually, that I'm the Paul Ford's latest
oh
podcast.
yeah, yeah. I think folks who have stuff to say and have podcasts they like, stick up your hand and we'll call on you and bring you up to the stage. But yeah, I got into that Ziadi and Ford podcast. I found it somewhere. I have no idea where, because there was I guess it was like their first episode, but I had no idea it was their first episode. Was this interview with Matt Levine and talking about FTX, and it was just perfectly in the crosshairs of what I wanted to hear. So I really like that. Have you listened to that one yet?
I have not listened to that one yet.
Okay.
I actually am really, I only listened to their most recent one, actually, and loved it. So I
Hmm.
am like really looking forward to doing household chores. I
Yeah.
can't
So
wait to
okay.
load the dishwasher.
So the one I listened to the other day, you're going to really like, which was the premise was this. I really enjoyed their style too. Kind of meandered up into this, as perhaps we do sometimes. But so, the proposal was Queen Elizabeth II, best CEO ever? Question mark. And
That's awesome.
contrasting this, like, her style of like never say anything of consequence in her whole life, for like 70 years on
For
the
70 years.
throne. That's
Right.
right. So loved it. And then contrasting Elon as like the antithesis of this, and then painting, kind of talking about Tim Cook as like very QE2 in his style as CEO.
Very
Anyway, so
QE2. That sounds great.
yeah,
Well,
I loved it.
so I think that also highlights a point that you have made that I think you and I both agree. I certainly agree with is that when we look at technical podcasts in particular, one of the things that you identified is like, a lot of these technical podcasts are not funny. Like
Oh yeah.
I really value humor in a podcast, and Paul Ford the guy's funny. He's just like in those as a pair, they seem to be very funny, and like that makes it compelling. I think that's actually really important.
I'm with you. Actually, I'm going to wind it back because even before Wait, Don't Tell Me, on the way to work, I used to, when I was working at Delphix, I had about a mile and a half walk, and I would listen to Car Talk, like
The classic.
record, and it is so delightful. And I think that like that's, when we started this, that's kind of what I aspire to, right? The like
The
the
click and clack.
demeanor, of Click and Clack, having so much fun, but like rooted in, I guess, these real people's real car problems. Um, so anyway, I think that's something about Ziadi and Ford that I really enjoy. Like they're having fun, right? They're having fun, and you're having fun with them. And there's so many technical podcasts I've listened to that I can't get into. And actually, I want to. Like I feel like this weird Protestant ethos of like working when I'm not working, right? Of being productive even when folding the laundry. I'm already being productive, by the way, from folding the laundry. Um, and I'm not going to name names, but I've listened to so many lousy ones, and waited all the way through. Um, but yeah, I've not found that many technical podcasts that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that if a technical podcast, if it's not going to kind of get into that kind of click and clack ethos, the kind of car talk ethos. By the way, am I supposed to say like don't code like Adam? Am I? Is that what we're going for?
Don't go like my brother,
Yeah,
right?
exactly right. If you're not going to kind of go with that ethos, it needs to be technically really, really compelling. There needs to be narrative that is just captivating. And I actually do have
Yeah.
two examples of that. So, or at least two examples. I'm sure I think I got more than the examples. But one example that is one of these podcasts that is just like unfindable is the Brady Haywood podcast, which is not like how would you ever find, and this is an engineer who goes into particular engineering disasters, and mainly civil engineering, but also aerospace engineering and a couple of others, and really, really, really good stuff. And talking about bridge collapses, and the one I would recommend, and actually I should have said this from the top, if you've got a podcast that you love, also mention an episode that you love that really represents that podcast. And for the Brady Haywood podcast, I really recommend that. I think it's a 5-parter on Apollo 13. That is really amazing. Apollo 13 is bonkers. I mean, that is just off the charts engineering, and it really good story, but amazingly well told in the Brady Haywood podcast.
That's awesome. Tatted Code Monkey. You were asking to talk, and you walked away, and we got you back.
Yeah, sorry, my kid started screaming. Yeah, I was just gonna say a consistently good podcast I've listened for the last several years is Econ Talk with Russ Roberts, and it's also a really good source of books because he interviews a lot of authors, and slightly tangential to economics. He like brings it back, but it's just a really good, consistent podcast.
Say the name of it again.
Yeah, you broke up for me right at the name.
Oh yeah, it's Econ Talk with Russ Roberts.
Econ Talk. Okay. All right, how are we gonna write these down? I know we're recording this, but people end up dropping links in.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that folks can drop some links into the live chat, and then if someone seems to get it right, drop some stars on it, and we'll go rep for the stars as we put the show notes together.
And
thank you, folks who are doing that.
And if you can't find it, yeah, we'll go find it. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like a good one. And you say you like it too because you get book recommendations out of it.
Yeah. A lot of books like I would never read. There was one. What was it? I think it was called Dark Salt Clear. Maybe it was a woman in the UK who spent some time on a fishing boat and just wrote about the life in the fishing village and that kind of stuff, and it was just really interesting. And it's lots of stuff like that, along with
it sounds great
economics talk.
And what's the cadence? Is it something that you kind of listen to more for current events, or would you recommend? Because another question I've got is there's so many great podcasts that are like not recording anymore, but the backlog is still amazing. Is it something that kind of
it's weekly. He records them way ahead of time, so it's not. It can be current sometimes, but it's got like 11 years of podcasts on there. But sometimes I'll read an old book and then go back and find that he did an interview with a person, and I'll go back and listen to the interview from like 4 years ago from some book I just found. Because he's interviewed Ryan Holiday a bunch and some other people, like just lots and lots of authors.
That is awesome. Well, that's a great recommendation. Thank you. Definitely get that one.
Thanks.
Get that one cleaned up.
Speaking of one with a lot of archive, have you listened to Brian How I Built This?
I have listened to How I Built This. Yes, that's a good one. Okay. That was one I definitely listened to when we were kind of contemplating Oxide.
Yeah. So How I Built This, I started listening to it with my older son who was getting into computer science. And actually, we listened to one on the creation of Discord. So highly recommend that episode.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And very germane. I did have to pause it for a moment because the founder of Discord went to Full Sail University in Florida and was kind of hyping that up. And I didn't need to pause it because this is a high school age student. I was listening to it and saying, that might be right for you. Let's not get too excited. Might be the right pick, might not.
He's like, Dad, can we just unpause the podcast, please?
Yeah.
We have to.
No more PSAs here.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Can I listen to something else? Will you give me the lecture on whether I can consider this guy's same life options, and then we can get back to the podcast? Yeah. There are some good ones on. I listened to one with the kids on How I Built This on Instagram, which was really good as well. But the Discord one I have not seen and would definitely want to check out. Are there other technical ones that you? Have you listened to the Amp Hour at all? The Amp Hour,
no.
That's another a good one about electronics. It's definitely all over the map, but really exciting. They're often interviewing folks and a lot of really interesting stuff there.
It's the Amp Hour.
Amp Hour,
nice.
Yes.
One I think you recommended to me that I've listened to a few episodes of is the Pick Place podcast.
Pick Place podcast is great. That's from Rick Alfer, a colleague of ours. Yeah, Pick Place
Yeah.
podcast is really good. And that you learn a lot about a domain that most people, certainly I, knew nothing about, which is PCB manufacturing.
Yeah, and Brian, you've often said, how you feel like the PCB deserves its history, and I think I kind of wandered into like part 2 of 3 or something, describing some of that history. So, something you might catch up on as well.
I feel like because Pick Place podcast I've kind of fallen behind on. I need to actually go back, and there's some stuff I actually need to re-listen to it because there's stuff that I really didn't appreciate the first time. But now that we've had some manufacturing problems, it's like,
Yeah.
mislabeled real. Interesting.
Yeah. Right. Now, my first reaction was, well, that could never happen to us. Now, well,
okay, that will hopefully never happen again. On that topic, another one that I love that they have not turned into a podcast, but absolutely should, the Computer History Museum's oral histories. Do you listen to these?
Yes, I do. Actually, that's another one I listen to. Will, my older son, we were listening to one with Dave Cutler.
That one is
which was
good.
Great.
Yeah, I thought that
And
one
then
was good.
The Pierre Lamond one is scintillating.
The Pierre,
both because Pierre's story. Pierre, Oxide investor. Both because his like the things he's done are amazing, but like that he wanted to build transistors. Like literally listening to transistor radios in Vichy, France, as a small child. It's like talk about a sort of an origin story. It's just wild.
It's wild. That's a very good oral history, and there are a bunch of them. One that I actually got turned on to that series initially because our colleague Aryan pointed me to the 3DFX panel. I don't know if you've listened to that one, but that is also mesmerizingly good.
Yeah, I really want to check out that one. Aryan pointed me to that as well after I read this book about the creation of Doom, and it had reminded me of the 3DFX card.
The Masters of Doom.
I gotta get that in the queue. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and hey, Computer History Museum turned into a podcast. There is, which actually is and Jacob, I want to get to you. It's also a kind of a good, and I'll drop a link into this tweet. But I saw it's not a tweet. Actually, it's a toot on Mastodon about a really great post saying that the great thing about the phrase "wherever you get podcasts" is it highlights the power of RSS and the fact that no one owns that. Where you get podcasts, that you can get podcasts anywhere that has an RSS feed, actually, is a tremendous value to podcasts, and the reason that they continue to endure. It's also the reason why they can be a bit hard to search. Jacob, you got a podcast.
Yeah, sorry, I joined a little late, so I didn't know if there was any like strict categories that we had to recommend, but one podcast that I really enjoy has a big back catalog, and it kind of peters out a little bit later, but Malcolm Gladwell did the Revisionist History podcast. There's a handful of episodes that are really good, but there is a really key season, I believe it's 3rd or 4th, where he goes through what he terms the Bomber Mafia. It covers like a key part of that war that was like the a couple of key characters during that time. But the whole podcast kind of has Malcolm Gladwell's like nice bite-sized, like cool look on history. But it has a lot of really good pace for the first 4 seasons, I think.
Awesome. Now, and I gotta confess, Gladwell, I loved The Tipping Point, but I get nervous with Gladwell that I'm getting overly condensed stuff. Do you get nervous about that at all, Jacob? Or how is the?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
no,
okay.
for sure.
Right.
It's that I did want to like maybe preface as like he can be a little bit too I can't remember what the word for like the type of bias is, but when somebody's telling you something, it feels like I want to believe you a little bit too much. That's definitely where it comes to. I'm a student right now, and I listen to a couple of his books as audiobooks right now on my commutes to school. And like a handful of them, it's like, I don't know enough about this to question it well enough. Like, he does really good research, but usually it's always like case examples from like what these police officers did in this city. And it's like, okay, but I don't have a background in this. But I feel like he just does enough good work that it, like, some of the things seem to be like on inspection good enough. Most of the stuff in revisionist history is like stories of people more than it is like, I don't know, what it really means to become an expert in X amount of hours.
Right. I was gonna say the classic one is this kind of 10,000 hour idea, which is, I think, not really supported by evidence. But yeah, I love the tipping point, Jacob. I love your approach to it of like, hey, there's a lot of this stuff that is just he is earthing stuff that's actually interesting and factual. It's not merely being distilled. One of the ones that the anecdotes that he has from the tipping point that again is not him being selective. It's just it is a true fact. Is pointing out the 1-800 numbers on the back of household products about, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns? Call this 1-800 number, and pointing out,
Oh yeah.
which is like, yeah, why does that exist? And of course, that exists because they've got people that are very sensitive to soap or smell are likely to call those numbers, and they pay attention to what they say because those people are, which I think is a really interesting idea. So that all right, you've inspired me to go check some of that stuff out.
Pretty awesome.
Is that a
corn?
You're right. Is that
Corn tool.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
So how many do I get?
As many as you want.
As
We'll
you
cut
want.
you off
Go
at
for it.
some
No
point.
bag limit. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I'll try to get some of like the more technical or tech focused ones out the way. So I was trying to go through my OPML file from Overcast, and I really wish I could find. I star a lot of stuff in Overcast, but I'd have to figure out how to export to get that data out. It may not be user facing, but
Would you mind just describing Overcast? I don't use Overcast. How does it work?
So Overcast is a Apple platforms only podcast app. So there's the iOS, iPad OS, and now you can get it on Mac OS as well. It's from Marco Arment. I think he was like the first engineer at Tumblr, and then he did Instapaper, and then like his next big app was Overcast. And one of the reasons I like it is I like the audio processing that it does. So I use the smart speed, which basically it shortens the length of like dead space.
Oh, it speeds things up. Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't cut it out totally, so it doesn't sound just totally unnatural. But I think I have saved. Oh God, let me look. Let's see if I can compare a little process.
I listen to recorded meetings at 2x a lot, and then you get into like an actual meeting. You're like, why is this person speaking so slowly? It's like, no, you dummy, because you've been listening to them sped up for.
Yep. Yeah, I can't find it, but there's like a stat. I want to say it's like I've saved. Yeah, here it is. Smart speed has saved you an extra 1,066 hours beyond speed adjustment.
Okay, you are after my own heart here. That you obviously listen to a lot of podcasts. To save that much dead space, you listen to a lot of podcasts. All right, so what are some of your favorites?
So I'm a big Merlin Mann fan. So like I discovered him like from like the This Week in Tech podcast, like Mac Break Weekly. So I was a longtime listener of Back to Work. And so he has one that I still listen to, which is Dubai Friday, and it's like a weekly challenge podcast. So they do things. So I think one of the recent challenges they had was create a digital Zettelkasten, right? Like the whole personal knowledge management thing. It's really funny. It's kind of off kilter or whatever. Let's see what else. Some new ones that I've discovered recently. So there is the Future of Coding podcast. So there's like a community, futureofcoding.org. And the format has changed several times. The back catalog is really worth checking out. So like if you are kind of into like the future of programming languages or programming systems, There's some like really good interviews or discussions. Kind of some of the more recent formats they've been doing. They've been breaking down like seminal papers in the whole, humane or like new media type space. So things like I think they did Worse is Better. I think they did one of the Alan Kay papers on like the history of small talk, or it was one of those like reviews of like the Small Talk project.
Yeah, this looks good.
Um,
This looks good. And they did the Doug Engelbart piece. Yeah, this looks
yeah.
JCR link. Yeah, this looks good. Adam, I assume this, the
Another,
future of coding is new to you as well. I assume, Adam.
Yeah, I've not heard of that one. Adding that right now.
and so there was another one that was put out by I think it was started out as, I don't know if it's still affiliated with Notion, the kind of like the smart programmable document like app or whatever, but it's called Tools and Craft.
Tools and craft. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna find the links and I'm gonna put it in the
Yeah.
channel.
Okay.
But I mean, so yeah, they had an interview with Alan Kay, interview with Ted Nelson. The Andy Matushak interview was really good. Andy Matushak I think he was like a early iOS engineer, and then he was at Khan Academy for a while, and just been doing a lot of work in the tools for thought space, and especially like stuff with space repetition and just the whole intelligence amplification. So computing as an intelligence amplifier.
Yeah, this looks really good. They got Danielle Baskin too, is a guest that they've had. I love her work; is terrific, so wildly creative. Yeah, this looks like what a great find. And do you use Notion, Adam? I feel like Notion is the kind of thing that you would turn me on to.
It does, but I have never used it. Like, I agree that it feels like the kind of thing that I would be using and loving. But no, I've never tried it. I feel like a dummy. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got an all-star lineup here. Like, or more, I should say more like really, it looks like really interesting guests. So these are conversations.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, Ted Nelson, Jonathan Blow. I wonder if they got their Jonathan Blow conversation to fit inside of 3 hours, because we did not.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember. I listened to that one on the drive from Mississippi back to Austin. So yeah, that was
right. And
it was low there.
right. You were able to get a third of the way through it between back to Austin. When we interviewed Jonathan Blow, it went on for 3.5 hours, and he, like a hurricane that had entered the Gulf, was gathering steam. Steve, Jess, and I were all like dying of hypothermia in Jess's garage, but that was a conversation. He could definitely really intriguing guy. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
This is a great find.
Let's see. Another one is so I think it's, what is it? Is it Jeremy Keith, Resilient Web Design? So I think he wrote a short book on resilient web design, and really trying to keep with the grain of the web and how you build software over the web, and progressive enhancement. And
what does that mean? Resilient web design? Because I'm getting the sense that's like resilient from a UI perspective, UX perspective, or
yeah. So let me go. Let's see. Resilient web design. You might think that this is a handbook for designing robust websites. It's not a handbook. It's more like a history book. I used this book. I was teaching a course in like full stack web development, and this was probably one of the best resources for just just the philosophy of how you build software for the web. And so even if you're building rich applications, and it's whatever, whether you're doing a spa or you're doing server side, right? But just respecting the fact that hey, everybody probably doesn't run JavaScript, and somebody may be using a screen reader or have other accessibility needs. So use all the whiz-bang features, but be aware of the system and the environment and the ecosystem that you're participating in, and respect it. And hey, here, this is some historical context for why. But
That's really interesting.
Man, I want to say,
yeah.
I think it's like you can listen to the whole book. So it's basically an audio book, but you basically, publish, like each chapter is like an episode, so you can listen to it like a podcast. So like, yeah, you can get the book for free. You can go to resilientwebdesign.com, but I believe there's an RSS feed, and
you can get to the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I think Jeremy he created a website called huffduffer.com, HUFFDUFFER, and it's basically a way for you to create ad hoc, podcast feeds. So basically you can create your own feed or whatever. You get a link to something that can some media file, to add to as an enclosure. So whether that's another podcast or just a site that has a link to an audio file, you can create your own podcast, and the site has tags, so you can look for like tags on different topics. So I think he just huffed up his whole book. And you can actually just get the link, get the RSS feed there. Every tag has an RSS feed. Every user has their own feed. Huffduffer is actually pretty cool. And then building on top of that, there's something called Huffduff Video, where you can take video links and it will go and download the video and extract the audio and throw it up. And I think the Huffduff site it'll probably only host it for 30 days. So actually thinking about Jonathan Blow, right? If you want to listen to like the end of civilization or whatever, like the talk where he's basically, kind of the call to action is to just be mindful that we still are able to build resilient or, just build good systems. You could just huff up that video, right, and listen to it as a podcast because it still works as a podcast.
I want to do this for
visuals.
The Computer History Museum Oral History Series, which is all on YouTube as videos, and I want them all to have. I want to have all that on audio. So I guess I use huffduff as a verb. I'm always I'm gonna go. Yeah. I'm gonna go huffduff that video.
Huffduff it.
I'm gonna huffduff it.
Yeah, huffduff it.
All the kids are saying that, Brian.
That's all the kids are saying it.
Yeah. There's a bookmarklet, I think, which it'll like look for links on the page or whatever, and you can add entries.
As an aside, does Will not use the phrase "down horrendous"? Adam's making the fact that I was implying that anyone still on Twitter is down horrendous. Does Will?
No, I've never heard him say that, and I'm almost embarrassed to ask him. Like I've not asked him yet, just because I.
No, you gotta just like drop it in conversation.
Terrified of what his reaction's gonna be.
You see, like when he's about to leave, he's like, "You got to be down horrendous to wear that jacket." And just see if he's like, wait, what the?
He just might die where he stands.
That's right. He might. Sorry, Cortool. This is my reference again to a tweet, and this is something my kids say to one another, in particular, and to me. They basically everyone is any life choice I make is because I. So, Cortool, can I ask? You obviously listen to a lot of podcasts. And you mentioned doing one on a long drive. Do you end up? Is it driving, or how do you end up listening to so many podcasts?
I mean, I'm listening to less now. The reason I guess I listened to so many, it was either that or like audiobooks so I did doctoral studies, and so let's see, I started my studies like 2 weeks before Katrina at LSU. And so my wife was supposed to move with me, but they just kind of threw the professional market in Louisiana in an upheaval. And so we were just like, oh, it'll only take you 3 years to get your PhD, right? We can do this. So I would drive back and forth between Jackson and Baton Rouge every weekend
Wow.
for years. And so, I listened to a lot of podcasts, a lot of audiobooks.
Right, I can imagine. And you must have things. First, how long a distance is it from Jackson to Baton? Or that's got to be a couple of hours at least, right? From Jackson to Baton Rouge?
Like 2 hours,
2 hours,
15,
right?
yeah.
And I got to imagine, like, I feel like I've listened to a lot of podcasts between Sacramento and the Bay Area, and I got to imagine that it's that Jackson to Baton Rouge is probably not an overly compelling drive from a scenery perspective. So you're probably welcoming, I would imagine.
It's
Not to
that bad.
denigrate either Jackson or Baton Rouge, of course, but I just imagine that.
Yeah, you drive. It's not that bad. You're driving through Piney Hills. Like I drove cross country from Memphis to the Bay Area, and the flat land in New Mexico, that was dangerous. 'Cause just
Yeah.
in Arizona, that was dangerous. Yeah. So yeah.
All right. So you were in the car lot, and so do you have? Because I feel I definitely have this, and Adam, I wonder if you have this as well, where I'll listen to something, and I will like, God, I know exactly where I was when I was driving, hearing this. I'm like, my memory is associated with kind of where I physically was. You must have the same thing if you did that drive so many times.
Yeah. It's some stuff is starting to blur together because at least that was basically a commute, and so some stuff just kind of
Right.
it's just like it's like, huh. Like, yeah, how many times, like, it's almost like you can pick a place and then it's like, I remember chuckling at this thing that this person, said, or this thing, this thought provoking thing, or whatever and stuff. So it's quite a bit of that. Yeah, it's like, it's
my oldest was working at a summer camp, and my younger the now 18-year-old and the now 15-year-old and I would drive back and forth to him every weekend. So it's a similar kind of thing of like 2 hour drive every weekend, and listen to a lot. We actually listened to a lot of the Brady Haywood podcast on that route. Those are great. Well, those are great suggestions. That's a bunch of really good stuff. Yeah. Do you have any others that you want to get out there?
Let's see. I'll pick one more. Crap. Which one did I have? I enjoy software defined talk. It's like the host. It's like three gentlemen. I think they were all like based out of Austin. I think only one is still in Austin, but they're kind of like in the cloud native. I think they were like product management, marketing. That was kind of like initial technical background, but I think
nice. Okay, this is Cote's, but Michael Cote's got a podcast. I had not listened to this. Have you listened to this, Adam?
Yeah.
No, I've never seen this one before. This looks great.
Yeah, and it's a really good interviews. And now let's see, one I would probably recommend. They did a review of the Kubernetes documentary. That was a good one.
All right, sorry. There's a Kubernetes documentary?
Yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah.
What? I feel like Kubernetes documentary, it's almost like a caption contest. I feel like there's that's interesting. Who does it follow?
I think it's, I don't know all of the names. It's like Joe Beta, Kelsey Hightower's in it. Yeah, a lot of I'm trying to remember. It's like, what were the controversies? I want to say Solomon and some of the Docker people might have been in it.
That sounds good.
It's most of the main characters.
That sounds good.
I can't get out of my head the time that Ice Cube performed at KubeCon.
Oh God!
And I'm at the Straight Out of Compton documentary. Anyway, and they're just mashing up in my head. I'm gonna have terrible nightmares.
No, I mean they called it Straight Out of KubeCon.
I know.
This is when I assume, did you not get as distracted by that as we did? Because we were like, wait a minute, how much is Ice Cube making for this? This is with like Mesosphere was putting him up to this. And
Yeah.
the and then this is like when we learned that you could have like Snoop Dogg at your all hands for like $20,000, which feels like that's obtainable. That's like, I mean,
That's the spirit. There you go.
Ice Cube was surprisingly inexpensive, is what we learned for Straight Outta CubeCon, which is like, oh my god, what an embarrassment. But this documentary looks interesting, and also I need something to watch with my 15-year-old that is not a documentary of a failed company, because I wanted to watch The Smartest Guys in the Room. Have you watched that, Adam? About Enron?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I wanted to watch it this weekend. I'm like, hey, I've got a great documentary that I want us to watch together. He's like, okay, but if it's about a failed company, no thanks. I'm like, all right, well.
Did you watch what's the documentary about the people that left Apple? Was it General Magic?
The General Magic. He and I did watch that one together, which is great. That documentary is great. Silicon Cowboys is great. He felt, and this is where he and I ended up getting in an argument, where he felt the General Magic documentary is a, quote, documentary about a failed company. I'm like, that is an oversimplification of the General Magic documentary, which I think is a documentary about a great shared dream that was just many years too early. But yeah, that's a great. Have you seen that one, Adam?
No, I haven't. I gotta put that one on the list.
And that's one that that may be a little father-son one, honestly.
All right.
I think.
All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah, that's one to check out. Well, this is a lot of really good stuff. Corto, thank you very much. Yeah, this is something you've given us a ton of stuff. Because I broke the ice on failed companies, may I go through a list of favorites of failed company podcasts? And I'm just sorry that I find them so compelling.
Do it.
Okay, so I've got a bunch here. Well, one actually, obviously the Theranos podcasts are great. Both the Dropout and John Carreyrou's podcast are both. I think you've listened to at least one of those, right, Adam?
I know the Dropout as a Hulu show. Is that was a podcast?
It was based on a podcast. The Hulu show was based on the podcast.
I didn't know that. And then you're referring to Bad Blood: The Final Chapter.
Bad Blood: The Final Chapter. That's the Carreyroux one, and which is also very good. And just hanging on every episode there. The thing that actually. Both of those were somewhat Oxide inspirational. Maybe I shouldn't be going here.
Okay, let's pull this one back.
In that, the Dropout talks to a bunch of Theranos employees, and you realize how compelling a big vision is. A big vision is really, really compelling. And you think to yourself, man, it is such a tragedy that Theranos was fraudulent, because it actually attracted people that were willing to take a really big swing at a really, really, really hard problem. And I just think like there's a lot to be said for people are attracted to hard problems, which is kind of paradoxical.
Yeah, and for Theranos, I mean, obviously for Oxide too, but really talented people, like alarmingly talented people, were pulled in there.
Yeah, certainly for Theranos.
And I assume you're going to talk about Bad Bets.
I am going to talk about Bad Bets. So Bad Bets, they've done 2 seasons, one for Enron. Enron is like the World War II of failed companies, in that it is so deep, like you just can't learn too much about it. There's just so much there with respect to
Change the world. It's like every week could have its own documentary. Absolutely.
Absolutely. The Enron now in color, colorized Enron. No, I just think it's extraordinary. And 2 on that. So 1, the Bad Bets on Enron. Also, do you listen to Acquired at all?
No, I haven't. I don't listen to
I know I saw Steve here earlier. Steve's a huge Acquired fan. Acquired is a good podcast. They've been at it for a long time. And they do profile. It's like every company has a story. And so they take companies and tell the story of the company. I would recommend, I just got done listening to the TSMC, which is very good. And I mean, there's so much that's remarkable about TSMC as a company and that history. But then they did, in part because of FTX, they did one on Enron, which is not normally normally they talk about companies that are they're very positive about companies that are still in existence. In Enron's case, they're talking about obviously a company that's deceased, but a really, really good, long, like 3.5 hours on Enron. But that's very good. Even having listened to Bad Bets on Enron, I just feel like I can't take too much Enron. So that's a really good one. I promise I only have like 60 of these. The Boom Bust on HQ Trivia. Boom Bust is the name of the podcast. Do you remember HQ Trivia?
No.
HQ Trivia was this thing that would happen at like 6 o'clock. The kids were really into it back in the day. It was a live trivia program, a live trivia app, effectively. And they had aspirations that they were going to replace broadcast television. And so, but that podcast is, and this is one that you kind of listen to, it's a narrative. So you listen to all episodes. Really, really good. So Boom Bust on HQ Trivia is outstanding. And then the other one that I feel, do you listen to Startup at all as a podcast?
No, I don't.
Startup was from Gimlet Media. And
I listened. What was the first season of? Was that the first season of the Gimlet Media one?
Yes.
I think maybe I did listen to that one. Yes, I listened to it when I was starting my own company. Yes,
and it's very good and almost unprecedented because they were so naive when they started Gimlet. And this is Alex Bloomberg, and he realizes that like I don't know how to start a company, but I do know how to like record audio. So he records audio for the entire time he's starting the company. And so he records these things that you never get recorded anywhere, that you never hear. And in particular, he records, I'm not sure if you remember this, Adam, he records him pitching Gimlet to Chris Sacca.
I do. There were two scenes I remember. That one and him talking with his wife about some offer coming in, but the Chris Sacca one definitely remember.
And so he pitches Gimlet to Chris Sacca, and he pitches it so terribly. And I remember, like, I remember vividly. You probably remember where you were too. I like stopped washing the dishes, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, Alex Bloomberg, I could pitch your company better than this.
The exact same reaction. I remember exactly where I was, and just tripping over himself. Could not. It was the most awkward thing I've listened to.
It was terrible. And do you remember Chris Sacca's like, oh God. Okay.
Yeah, just like eviscerates him, and it's like, okay, let me tell you what you should have said.
You have the ordering reversed. It's even better than that because he's like, oh wow, that's not the way I would pitch it. The way I would pitch it is, and then Chris Sacca turns around immediately, gives him a 1.5-minute pitch. And you're just like, God damn, that guy's good. I mean, it's just a really, really good pitch. And so Alex Bloomberg is like, oh, this is awesome. Like, you get it all. Like that, wow, that's a really good pitch for my company. And like, you must be in. He's like, well, actually, let me give you the other side of this. And then he gives him a minute of like why this company is just like uninvestable. And there's this great moment. Alex Bloomberg is like, what is happening right now? Like, I am so confused about what is happening because you just gave me the best reasons I have ever heard to invest in my company. And then you gave me the best reasons I've ever heard to never like talk to me again. And I don't know like which is which. And Chris Sacca's like, welcome to venture capital. But that is very good. They did a couple of seasons of that. They dropped, later seasons were not as good, but the second season is good. It follows one startup, follows a dating app actually. And I think it follows Bumble if I'm remembering that correctly, but that's one of these post my marriage dating apps. So they all blend together. But that one is definitely merits I want to actually go back and re-listen to that stuff because it was very, very good. Yeah.
Ian's been waiting, but we should. I wanted to mention. I don't know if you've listened to this one, but DevTools FM by a colleague of ours, Justin Bennett, is good. I've listened to a few episodes of it. In particular, I listened to one on Replay.io, which is this pretty nifty replay debugger for web apps.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like very much up our alley in terms of like developer tools and debugging and stuff like that. So dovetailed with what Corn Duel was telling us and one of our colleagues. So
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
that's
actually great to
great.
hear. That's something I've been meaning to listen to it. Justin, I apologize. I haven't listened to it yet, but I will. That sounds. I've been absolutely meaning to do that, so I will add that one to the and it's on replay with replay.io. You said okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, that's a good one. That might be a good entree for you, Brian. Interesting stuff about replay debugging and in the browser and how it works. A little too light on technical details, but definitely gives you the gist of it in a pretty interesting way.
That's awesome, Ian, a former Twitter Spaces regular. Welcome to Discord.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I've got 4 to recommend today. My first and the failed company in my roster is a podcast called As the Ice Cream Churns, which is about Ample Hills Creamery, which filed for bankruptcy on March 15th of 2020, so just before New York City shut down for the pandemic. Really good podcast and kind of explores a lot of the human side of like how that impacted their lives, as well as them trying to rebuild and then open up a new store called The Social. That's a really good listen.
And it's called As
worth
the Ice
checking out.
Cream Turns.
As the Ice Cream Churns.
Churns.
Yeah.
Churns. There we go.
Adam's got it.
Yep, got it.
That one's worth it checking out. The second to check out is called Let's Make a Sci-Fi. This is I think family friendly, though I haven't. I kind of
I'm a bad parent.
listened through all
I'm a
of
bad
it.
parent, so it's family friendly for me.
I mean, I think that if Wait, Don't Tell Me is family friendly, that I think that this would also be family friendly. It's like 3 comedians that are trying to make a script and a pitch for a original science fiction, like serious science fiction kind of pitch.
I have
And
heard
it's
about
interesting
this.
because they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, and they get some good guests on to like give them some guidance on technology and on society and on a few other bits and pieces, and it ends with them doing an audio play version of the pitch. It's definitely compelling. I kind of power listened through that one. It was kind of the book you can't put down equivalent of a podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I have
amazing
2
guests on
more.
that one too. I'm looking at Rainn Wilson and Neil deGrasse Tyson. A lot of
Exactly,
a lot of
right.
good ones.
You start listening to it, and then you're like, oh, okay, this guy's on it. All right, I didn't realize that they managed to get them. So, yeah, definitely a good listen. There's 2 more. There's a podcast called Invest Like the Best
That's a good one.
I listened to, but the most recent episode that stood out to me, they had Shane Battier on, who is a NBA player. And
yes, written about by Michael Lewis in the New York Times, I think, a while back, or maybe the New Yorker a while back, talking about how
your memory
was
is
an
correct.
undervalued member of the Rockets. Yeah, and also Duke
Yeah,
alumnus.
it was called the No Stats All Star was the article in the New York Times, really interesting individual, and has kind of a very different view on the sport and how to play it, and kind of stuck to his principles on valuing the things that other people didn't necessarily value, where he didn't put up the best stats, but in terms of the impact that he had on the team when he was on the court was undeniable from the like overall stats of him on the court versus not on the court. So that one was worth a listen. And my last and probably the more tech focused podcast, Spotify have a podcast called Nerd Out at Spotify. I'm not huge on all of the episodes, but they had an episode called Open Source Work is Work, which talks about Spotify's kind of open source management strategy within a large organization, and this was pretty compelling to me as someone who's in a similar sized organization, to hear about how they're thinking about how they approach open source and the kinds of projects they put out there, how they maintain those projects over time, how they kind of support the people inside the organization that's doing that work. Yeah, a really compelling episode to kind of think about the nuts and bolts of how you deal with the people side of managing open source work within a large organization. So that one was worth checking out as well.
That is awesome.
These sound great. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, and Invest Like the Best is another Steve Tuck favorite. Adam, I don't know if Steve loves Invest Like the Best. There's some really good episodes, but I've not listened to give me some good ones to go listen to. This is great, Ian. Thank you.
So I telegraphed this one early. I telegraphed this one earlier, Brian, but Ian just reminded me of it. So there is a podcast called "How Did This Get Made?" It's right up your alley. It's about terrible, terrible movies.
Oh,
and it's
no!
It's three comedians. It's Paul Scheer, Jim Raphael, and Jason Mazzucas who watch a movie and talk about it.
Okay,
now, the reason
have they talked about any movies that you and I have together seen in the theater?
Well, so my wife, who knows me and loves me, bought us tickets to the live show a few years ago, and so we watched the movie in preparation for this. A movie you've never heard of. It's directed by Leonard Nimoy. A movie starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. What movie? It's called Holy Matrimony. About like the Canadian Hutterites. Anyway, it's not a movie I'd recommend. The only thing I would say was that these comedians are very funny, but I felt like I studied this movie in depth. And I feel like they kind of watched it casually. I have funny things to say about it.
So you like this, but you think that they don't have enough rigor in their craft of criticizing these terrible movies. You feel that feel that you and I have been more rigorous in our watching of terrible movies. Am I getting that subtext correct?
That's very well said. Yes.
So are we going to do some sort of like, should we do a competing, should we do like Gigli, our review of Gigli for them? I mean, there's just we can.
Yeah, but they keep it to like an hour. Could we keep our review of Gigli to like less than 6? Like that seems unlikely.
I can't. No deal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
We want to go into it in all of its fetid glory. A movie that Adam and I did regrettably see Gigli together in the theater. I mean, regrettably, it was intentional, so. Jeremy!
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
how are you?
Better than most. I was going to. Not as of course.
It's a competition.
Of course, not as good as others. I mean, there's always a top.
There you go.
What did I do? I started my podcast listening on my college internship at the National Association of Securities Dealers, the regulatory arm of the NASDAQ. It's called FINRA now, but that's not important. Bought an iPod to help me with my 4.5-hour commute. So I went from the bus to the red line to the blue line to the van. Sometimes I would slug it, which for those not from DC is Uber, but you pay for it by being a meat token that allows the car owner to access the high occupancy vehicle.
Anyway. Interesting. This is like casual carpool in the Bay Area.
Yes.
So you can, that's really interesting. And is there like another app to get on that? I mean, how do you?
So no, this was 2005. There weren't smartphones. Oh, I gave the year away. In any case, what you would do is you would line up at the bus station and folks would drive up and say, I'm going to the Pentagon. I'm going to Pentagon City. And they'd drop you off in the core of the city at a metro stop, wherever they were headed. And since you were headed another hour and a half down the line, it doesn't matter where you start your journey. It's just nicer to get well closer if you're out in the suburbs.
So people told me casual carpool is like this could only happen in the Bay Area. If this happened anywhere on the East Coast, everyone would get knifed in the car. And I'm like, no, that's not the case. And I did not know that DC also had effectively casual carpool, because I mean I commuted to work for years via casual carpool, which was.
Oh no, it was very much a thing. I'm not sure what's since happened to it. Maybe Uber's a thing now, but yes, like 20 years ago, definitely a thing.
Awesome. So you're jamming, you're listening to podcasts starting from way back in the day.
Oh yeah, and then even up until Apple Watch. And so shout to Marco and Overcast, who's made an amazing product. I had made the terrible version myself because I wanted to listen to podcasts on my watch on the walk. And so what I would do is you'd get RSS. RSS would expand the URL to a valid download URL. You'd go to Audacity and change the tempo. Then you'd slice it into 64 pieces, and then you'd import it as an album with 64 tracks into iTunes. And then from iTunes, you'd send it to the iPhone. And then from iPhone, you'd send it to the watch via Bluetooth. And then you were able to listen to it. And you could forward it back by going.
It's as easy as recording Twitter Spaces.
Very much so. But to tell you which podcasts I like, The Moth has been, I think there's been, like 23 years of it. A variety of stories, a variety of themes, and then each theme has many stories. Each of them are an hour. Some of them are famous folks, completely unknown. All of them are pretty well told. Some of them are amazingly well told. And those has a very long back catalog. I think they've had 40,000 different storytellers, and so
big back catalog,
you can get well lost in that.
And family safe. This is a good one if you got kids in the car, even young kids. It is good. I don't know if you listen to The Moth much, Adam, but really good stuff, and often I think very thought-provoking for kids. In particular, because it is radio safe, it's family safe, but they get into some topics that are big, important topics. So that's a great recommendation, Jeremy, of course.
What else? Behind the Bastards. So Robert Evans, a journalist and extremism researcher, pairs off with a rotating cast of comedian friends and takes you down a book report Wikipedia rabbit hole of the most terrible people in history. So royal families and dictators and Henry Kissinger, televangelist, Jeff Bezos, the Dulles brothers. They were the founders of the CIA. And I would recommend starting with the mini-series that they did called Behind the Police, which looks at the history of the job, which is really, I mean, it's not good. It's terrible. Right. But it's useful to be exposed to.
Oh my God, that sounds great. Oh, this looks really good. Wow. I'm going to do nothing but clean the house for the next 2 weeks.
Going back to the lighter side of things, a podcast called Reasonably Sound. So it does long episodes on stuff like the Brahm. It's that noise that Chris Nolan absolutely loves, and I guess Michael Bay. That like screeching noise that like the Transformer makes, or like the giant ship makes crashing into the ground, and then slowly like the hero turns, and I won't give the whole episode away. Did an episode on like the history of hold music and where that comes from and how it's licensed and that sort of thing. Where else? Back to the Dark Place. There've only been 4 episodes. There's a 5th one that was an intro, but we'll kick that one. Terrorism Bad. Another group of extremism researchers review media, and so did an episode on American Sniper and that 2020 movie, The Hunt. That was everyone was all up in arms for a minute, and then a long 2-parter on Far Cry 5, the one that deals with the video game that deals with the cult.
That's called Terrorism Bad.
Yeah.
I would add to that. Have you listened to The Rabbit Hole from New York Times? That is another really good one that you want to listen to in sequence about how people become radicalized online. Really, really interesting. If you are a parent of teenagers, it's definitely worth listening to that one in particular. Teenagers, literal or metaphorical. But that's and it's not too much of a downer, but definitely a good one to listen to.
More from the how this got made or why we made this. The Playdate podcast from the folks at Panic. There's a little orange, around the size of, not orange, yellow, around the size of a deck of cards video game console that throws back to like Game Boy. That Panic, the company that makes some of your favorite Mac and iOS software, and Teenage Engineering paired up on and released, I guess it was last year. And so both talking about the how the console was developed, and then also the folks who made games for it, talking about the games that they've put together.
That seems cool.
That looks real.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, I remember when that console came out, it seemed really neat. So I would love to hear about its backstory. I see this is the one that came out this year in April. Is that right?
I feel like I've had one longer than that. I think that so. I mean,
Oh,
chip
pardon me.
shortage and
I
shipping
mean the
from
podcast. Pardon me.
yeah. So that sounds right. And I know there've been a couple of
Yeah.
episodes.
Cool.
Playdate looks so you got a Playdate. I had
No,
looked at that long
no.
ago. No, but Jeremy, I take it, has one. It sounds like.
Yeah.
I do, yes.
Yeah, recommend it. It looks really neat.
I do. It's the game mechanic with the crank is interesting. Having the idea that you don't necessarily need to be a AAA title and pack 250 hours of gameplay into something. There can be something that's novel. You can sideload games onto it. You can buy them from like itch.io or different store. There's games for as little as $1, and so some of them are just like, "See, it's this one joke." And I go, oh, "Okay, that's maybe worth $1. We'll see." But having something that's easier to develop against than a PlayStation 5 that indie developers can make something neat. It feels like a little bit of that's been lost with like, oh, you have to ship this for the PlayStation. It has to rumble the thing and send sound to the controller and have a great multiplayer mode. And so going back to the time when we would put games on our graphing calculators or make text games or whatever.
Yeah, this looks really neat. I wonder if it's too late to get one. This looks a good one for the potential Christmas gift. So that looks like a good one. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it looks like a great podcast.
Yeah, and so part of the fun with Playdate was it's Wi-Fi, and so it trickles the games out to you when you start up. It gives you 2 games, and then every week it trickles more games out, and so you don't play everything all at once. And there's a bit of the surprise and fun of like, oh, it's new game day. Let's play the new games, and you don't quite know what you're getting, and you love some of them, and some of them are. And some of them you don't, but there's always more games coming.
That is awesome.
In addition to what you can sideload.
Yeah, that's great.
Very cool.
The last two I'd leave you with are if you saw HBO's Chernobyl, there's a podcast if you're into a disaster that's sort of fills in between the episodes and goes deeper than the show does.
We are into disasters.
A little,
that's for sure.
little. So, is the podcast called Chernobyl?
I believe so. The Chernobyl podcast is. I'll link it in the proto show notes.
Proto show notes. That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. That sounds good. I'll definitely binge listen to that.
And there is 2 comedians that do a podcast, Guys We Fucked, which is a ladies call in advice show, which is usually a good time.
So that's exactly like Car Talk.
Yeah, just I think maybe at the you start with the very family friendly moth and leave with something that's maybe I would not play with the family, but that sounds like a good listen.
It's on the iPod. It's in your ear hole.
There you go. That's right. That's awesome. Oh, Jeremy, those are terrific. Thank you so much. Those are really terrific recommendations and a lot of good stuff to go check out there. Peter, what do you got?
Hey, so he was talking about like these casual games, and I was just taking a look at my favorite game, and I've practically logged 7,000 hours, 6,958 hours on it since the game was released in like 2013. So I feel like I'm the opposite end of the gaming spectrum from somebody doing a casual game.
That's a lot of hours.
That's a lot of hours. So that's the thing is that game used to be a kind of a micro community, and like if you're in gaming, like everybody knew all games, and you can't do that anymore because there is such a divergence of what gaming means to people. You have like, for instance, I'm just too old. My Twitch hands don't work as fast, so I don't do first-person shooters, right? And it's like I'm down the rabbit hole like these crazy games, right? And that's totally different from people playing casual mobile games. I think that's one of that's just a truth. And I think this, although that's a story about gaming, I think the truth is also that that's the same with tech overall. That we've all gotten niched into various things. So like the podcast I'm listening to are like the data engineering podcast from Native, right? Or Sada's Cloud and Clear, which is very much cloud focused. And I have to admit that I'm not really a serial podcast listener. I'm very much a dumpster diver. Like I need to find out about a topic and I'll see, what podcasts are out on it. And I'll listen to like 4 or 5 or 6. And then like, that's it. Like, and I just don't have the strategic patience anymore to do with tech what I do with my favorite game, which is put thousands of hours into it. I'm sorry, Adam. I'm the opposite of you. Like, like sometimes when I'm on my off hours, I'm looking to do other things, with my podcast time, right? The one podcast I did want to bring people, because Brian, you were talking about the power of humor. And so the podcast I really wanted to say that kind of like lived up to my expectations was a podcast that was done by, of all people, John Hodgman and his friend Elliot Kalan, which was about BBC's I, Claudius series. So this is a series that was done in the 1970s. And these guys didn't do the podcast until literally decades later. Like just, I think it was like 2 years ago when they did this podcast. And each one is hilarious.
iPodius.
iPodius, yes, exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
That's awesome. I watched iClaudius with my folks in the 80s, week to week.
Yes. It was a fantastic series. Certainly not child friendly. I don't want to give anybody listening the wrong impression. That is definitely an adult series. And I was like, when I first saw it in 1976, I think it showed in the United States in 77. And like, just it's jaw dropping for somebody in middle school to be watching that kind of thing. It's not family friendly, kids. So
are you criticizing Adam's the way Adam was raised? This may actually explain a lot. If Adam had an early exposure to iClaudius,
ruined me from that point on. No, fair.
It was definitely. I mean, it definitely showed you like what was able to fly on the BBC as opposed to American broadcast television. I'll tell you that much. But the podcast itself is this wonderful take between like nostalgic trips to see what that time was like in the podcasters' own lives, a little bit about the actual history of the Roman Empire, and then of course a lot of wonderful takes on the quality or lack thereof in BBC set design in the 1970s. So
Peter, can you listen to the podcast without having seen iClaudius, or do you recommend doing them both simultaneously, or how does one kind of?
You certainly can, but for me, it was just filled with nostalgia. It's like some of the episodes I might not have seen in years, but it's like I know exactly the moment they're talking about because this is Brian Blessed. The cast that they have is Derek Jacobi is playing Claudius.
Right.
These are just, it's a fantastic series. So if you've ever seen iClaudius, it's definitely worth the commentary. If you've not seen it, you'll probably end up buying the DVDs, and paying full freight for them because it's just such a delightful introduction to the series. But you could probably watch watch an episode of the BBC and then go and listen to their podcast because it's kind of like just like you would watch any sort of annotated DVD of like Breaking Bad, things like that. There's a lot of commentary back and forth, but they do provide some wonderful color and commentary for people who are not familiar with the history or anything like that. And of course, John Hodgman is just always so good with the dry wit.
So iClaudius is available on streaming, by the way, so you don't have to buy the DVDs, which is good. And I definitely, I almost want to watch it with my 15-year-old who somehow my wife was forbidding him from watching Breaking Bad because it was child inappropriate, thereby challenging him to rattle off all of the incredibly inappropriate things he had already seen. That definitely backfired. At some point, she's like, "All right, fine, you just watch it. I don't want to hear this anymore. I don't want to hear about all the terrible, terrible things you've seen." But I would want to see how it holds up. And I would, Adam, how old were you when you watched iClaudius with your parents?
I mean, now I feel embarrassed, but I'm pretty sure that I was probably like 12, 11, that kind of neighborhood. We watched it on Masterpiece Theater. Like I remember indelibly, like the U's as V's in like the show graphic, as I'm now looking on Wikipedia to confirm.
Well, and also like the harpsichord in the Masterpiece Theater intro is Masterpiece Theater still around? We're dating ourselves here. We're gathering around the wireless, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I think that one for sure we're gathering. I mean, this is like where probably, I mean, 3-2-1 contact is probably it's got
You
more
don't
cultural
need that. That felt
currency.
unnecessary. That felt unnecessary. That felt like an unnecessary desecration of a Gen X foundational program. 3-2-1 contact. That just felt extremely unnecessary. That just no pulling hair.
Look, I love 3-2-1 contact. Well, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, I just
Contact
don't think
is
it has the social currency
good.
it once had.
Come on, the Bloodhound Gang. It is so good. It is so good. All right, Adam. I know you need to split, but I know we got at least one other Johan Tobias. I wonder if we want to get him on stage.
Yeah, here he
Peter,
is.
that's a great recommendation. Thank you very much. That's an exciting one to go listen to.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take care, guys.
Okay.
You too.
Thank you.
I'm from Europe, so I keep it a bit short because it's late here. But I have at least 3 suggestions. I posted a lot more in the chat. The first one is, or the last one is the It Could Happen Here podcast, where the first 1 or 2 seasons are about reasonable scenarios how the US could suddenly or not so suddenly fall to fascism, which was kind of pre January 6th.
Right. This is,
So,
in fairness to them, this is before the U.S. actually fell to fascism. So it was actually
Before it felt quite so precipitous. Yeah.
interesting.
Then I really found it delightful because it showed a few things which actually happened and just show what small adaptation would be necessary, and that those adaptations have been tried by other right-wing groups as part of their strategy, but not really combined. Something more IT or specific is the Asianometry podcast, which is a mix about Asian economics and silicon foundry stuff, ASML machine, all this kind of thing gets explained there, like with a decent background and from like a bit more economic lens, which is interesting. And the podcast is written in Taipei, Taiwan, so directly where the pulse of the silicon thing is. And something a bit more lighthearted is the Lost Terminal podcast, which is basically about not really a podcast, but like an audio drama, might be the right thing. Short audio drama once a week kind of deal, where it is about an AI which was previously on a space station, and humanity has gone through post-climate change and is restricted to living on the North and South Pole area, basically, due to climate change and stuff. And there are basically a bunch of machines strung together which get transported through the world, and there is a sentient artificial intelligence on it which also uses radio to communicate with people, and quite fascinating.
That sounds great.
And quite it's really great. And the guy which makes it also has a YouTube channel where he does Rust stuff.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. I've tried to listen to a little bit of dramatization, but haven't gotten super into it. But that would be a good one to try. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's like 10 minutes at max, and there's an audio snippet in there because the person which does it is also a composer. So that's that. And I have a question, which like chat can answer me in chat. I at the moment am in the process of getting my hands on some really cool exotic hardware, and I might want to do a podcast about my experience with it. And if anybody in chat has ideas for resources I should look into for this, I will be thankful if some emerge in chat.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's definitely pick it up in chat. That sounds like a really, and hopefully you do a podcast on it. We definitely love bizarre exotic hardware. So that'd be good. Yeah.
Are you interested enough so I should give a half a minute tease? Or
So I want to be. I know Adam's got to run. So
fair enough.
Let's do that. But let's do that in chat. Would be great. And we'll leave the chat open for a bit here. Because I've got a little bit of extra time. We'll leave the chat open. I do want to get to some other. I think that there are probably some other podcasts that people are thinking of that we want to recommend. So if we could drop those in the chat, and then Adam, I think we could just put all those in the show notes. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I appreciate everyone dropping these links and making the job easy to have some decent show notes this week. This has been terrific.
And can I just mention, can I close on just a handful of others that I haven't had a chance to mention yet?
Yeah.
One is The Journal. Do you listen to The Journal podcast? The Journal podcast is a good, this is a good kind of a daily news podcast. They did a series on Second Life, which is mesmerizing.
Ooh.
Really, really good.
Huh.
Maybe it's a 4 or 5 part series on Second Life. And they actually really good journalism because they are looking into the claims from Meta about the metaverse and hey, have these been tried before and what actually happened? And in particular, Second Life is still around. So they did some really good journalism talking to folks that are still on Second Life and what it's meant for them and what are some of the challenges there as well. Really, really good. It's that one is worth listening to. The other one that I love is The Pitch. Did you listen? So
No.
The Pitch was a Gimlet
No.
podcast, went on a protracted hiatus, maybe coming back, but good backlog. This is a bunch of startups going in front of VCs to pitch their startup. And it's it's mostly not kind of Sandhill type, these are folks raising smaller amounts of money. But there's some really good ones. I really enjoyed listening to that one. Certainly when we were kind of contemplating Oxide, listened to a lot of The Pitch. And then just another one that I want to get out there because it's another one that people might not find otherwise is Mystery Show. Did you listen to Mystery Show?
No.
Another Gimlet podcast. Only ran for a single season. I thought it was extraordinary. I was really surprised that it wasn't re-upped. And then I learned that it wasn't re-upped because some kind of structural problems at Gimlet. Turns out the fact that it wasn't re-upped was symptomatic of some broader problems at Gimlet. But Mystery Show is still around and absolutely loved Mystery Show. So that's, and then I'm listening to, just reflecting on my poor parenting decisions and child inappropriateness, listening to Bone Valley with my 10-year-old, which is about a gruesome murderer and someone who's falsely convicted, but is also a really good podcast. So there we are.
Nice. That reminds me. That sounds a little bit like S-Town. I don't know if you listened to that one, but another kind of true crime podcast I listened to. I kind of binge listened to.
Well, and I feel that like Serial, it is all kind of a tip of the hat to Serial. Really, I think podcasts really went non-linear with Serial in 2014.
Yeah. So totally agreed. So great recommendations on the spot, Brian. What are you listening to? What did you hear tonight that you're going to pick it up when you are washing the dishes later?
Oh man, I want to go. Honestly, there is so much good stuff in the backlog. I can't pick. I feel like I got the buffet in front of me.
Oh, yeah.
I actually am honestly gonna go listen to Zaid and Ford Advisors. Is that how do I pronounce that? Zaidi?
I think Ziadi. Ziadi.
I think I'm going to go listen to theirs on FTX. Is honestly the QE2. I think you hooked me on that one early, but a big Q. How about yourself? Do you have ones that you're particularly eyeing?
I'm between the Invest Like the Best on Shane Battier because I got to say, since I read that Michael Lewis article, 15 years ago, or whatever, it is stuck in my brain. And then the Playdate one has really that someone mentioned is really captured my imagination. So I'm going to go, I think, start at the beginning of the Playdate one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are good. A lot of great recommendations though across the board. This was fruitful. I felt like this was a lot of fun.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah, it's a great topic. And thanks everyone for dropping in the recommendations.
Thanks everyone for dropping the recommendations. Peter, I'll come back to you when Claudius scars my children. But a lot of great stuff to go listen to, and thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. Thanks everybody.